Reviver Ellen Malone. Speechwriting must be one of the weirdest jobs in the world. No matter how carefully the words have been prepared, you are never quite sure how they are gonna be delivered. Yesterday I was in London and I was watching one of my clients who is big Australian businessman deliver a speech that it written for him. I have written for him this passage, kind of with Winston Churchill in mind, about how we have got to fight for our future, fight to protect our position, fight our competitors, and it forgotten about the Australian accents. And I watched from the back of the room with horror as I saw him go. We have got to fight for our future, fight to protect our position, and I will tell you what, folks, when I wake up early morning, there is one thing I know for sure, I'm gonna do that day. So today I'm gonna share with you some speech writer secrets. I don't know whether you know this, but there is a secret language of leadership, that we all use to be the ancient rhetoric. This was a core part of the curriculum in ancient Rome, part of Trivium in London. Right the way through to the 19th century, it was possible to get free education in rhetoric but not in mathematics. Reflection, the important that was placed on the topic. Today teaching in rhetoric is restricted to a powerful privileged few. So what is a gonna do in my speech is revive this ancient art of rhetoric and share with the you six techniques so that you can all speak like leaders. So okay, stop, right, stop, listen, look left, look right, look center. How are you feeling? Distressed, anxious, little bit edgy? That's because I'm mimicking hyper ventilation. This is the authentic sound of fear, and that fear transferred to you. This is an ancient Roman rhetoric device. They used to call it in Ascenteton, and it's one leader still used today. So David Cameron used it. Broken homes, failing schools, sink state. Tony Blair used to use it as well. Education, education, education. Barack Obama too. A word at war. A planet in pearl. The worst financial crisis in a generation. Why there? Well, three is the magic. Well, three is the magic number in rhetoric. Government of the people, by the people, for the people, one empire, one leader. Eat well, laugh often, love much. That was the hardest part of the speech to practice so that you feel the applause. This is also an ancient Roman rhetorical device. They used to call it tricolon, which makes it sound like a peculiar part of the digestive system, but it's just putting things in three. You put your arguments in three. It makes sounds more compelling, more convincing, more credible. Just like that, and so we find the rule of three here, there, and everywhere. And so indeed you can tell the history of Verona through nothing more than the rule of three. If you think that Caesar used to come here 2000 years ago, Veni Vidi 4000 years ago, Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet, which was set here, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art you Romeo, but of course you far and away the most momentous event in Verona's history to date. TEDx reinvent, rethink, rely. Right? Let's move on. Number two, applause. Three sentences in which the opening clause is repeated. Now you. This is why Winston Churchill did what his we shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight on the field and in the street. Of course, he could have said this a whole lot quicker, but he wanted to communicate in emotional, so he repeated it. When we are emotional about things, our perspective is distorted, and This then manifests in our speech. And so this is the authentic sound of passion. I love Verona. I love Italy. I love pasta. I love Tanzania. All of you. I love the excitement. I love the energy. I love the enthusiasm here in the room. Are you feeling my passion? You should be, because I am a speech writer and I know how to speak a point. It sweeps people away, and this is why this technique is used by slick salesmen and by market traders. I am not asking 20 euro and I'm not asking 16 euro. I'm not even asking a pound, 10 pounds. It sweeps people on to the next point, which is free balance in statement. Ask not why your country can do for you. Ask when you can do for your country. This there is nothing wrong with America that can't lie. God, by what right, what America to be or not to be. If the service sounds as if it's balanced, we imagine that underlying situation is balanced, and our brain is tuned to like things that they are balanced. Balanced mind, balanced diet, balanced life. So we are drawn to this kind of sentences. We are attracted to them even if the balance is actually just an illusion. Like we are look to the future, not the past. We are working together, not against one another. We are thinking about what we can do, not what we can't. Now let's move on to the number 4, metaphor. Metaphor is probably the most powerful piece of political communication, but it's a bit no one ever talks about. The elephant in the room, so the speak, which is extraordinary because we use metaphor once every in 16 words on average. So a conversation is littered with metaphors, scattered with metaphor. We can't speak for long without reaches for metaphor, and metaphor are very loaded. She metaphor are all over the place, and they are politically in that they are used by people to lead people toward things, or indeed to make them recall. And so we have beautiful images of people, images of love, images of family or sunshines to order to draw people toward things. And we use discussing image, vermin, scary monster, disease, sickness in order to make people recall, and they are all lies, and they are never challenged, and yet the name has enormous impact on the way that people behave and respond. There has been research showing changing nothing more than the metaphor in a piece of text can lead to fundamental different reaction from people on question, ranging from whether or not they will invest in a common, whether or not they will backtrack particularly crime policies, to even whether or not they will support a foreign war. And so this is really important stuff, and it's all around us. So let me just take three of the big metaphor. Three is the magic number. Three of the big metaphor that are around at the moment. The Arab Spring. You are all heard of the Arab Springs. You can talk about what's going on in the Middle East without calling it an Arab Spring. The Arab Spring, sun shining, flower blooming. This is a time of regrowth, rebirth, regeneration, and yet it's a big lie. Isn't it? Even the most optimistic geographical experts look at the Middle East and say this is going to take 2 generations to recover. It's not an Arab Spring, it's an Arab inferno. Take another one, the Kalias jungle. Now, this is phrase that has really taken roots, metaphorically speaking. In the last year or so, if you Google Kalias and jungle, you will get 6 7 results. If you Google Callias and Croisets, you will get just 500,000 results. And watch the image. This is a planting in your mind. Is a planting in your mind the idea that is migrant are like wild animals to be afraid of? Are they dangerous? They are represent a threat to you. And this is very dangerous metaphor because this is the language of genocide. It's the language of hate. It's the same metaphor that Hitler used against the Jews, depicted them as snakes. It's the same language which was used in Rwandan genocides by the Hutu against the Tutsi. They were described as cockroaches, and so it should be intense concern to us that this is phrase that is being used now by the mainstream media to talk about some of the most vulnerable people on our planets. Let's take one more. The financial storm. The financial storm for the financial crisis. Was the financial crisis really matter? A crisis really an act of nature, as the storm metaphor suggests? So it has nothing to do with greedy, bankrupt, time politician or effective regulation. The storm plant a phony image in our mind that this is something that just swept in naturally and equally will just sweep away with no need for action on our part. This is a big lie. Pope Francis knows that it's a big lie, and so he doesn't speak using the financial storm metaphor. He has a different metaphor. He talks about the dung heap of capitalism, and so that he is using the metaphor or shit, which is wonderful because what he is calling for, he is demanding a cleanup of a whole system, and this is metaphor that every human being on the planet can instantly understand, will be instantly disguised by, and this is a metaphor that can get a giggle from time to time. So, falling into the metaphorical space is one of the some of our funnier politicians do from time to time. Boris Johnson back in the UK, he's talk about now the Labour leader emanate from the bowl of the trade union movement. In my time working in government, we had Tony Blair and Gordon Brown described as two cheeks of the same area, and Ronald Reagan once talked about government as a baby with a huge appetite, and on the other hand, no sense of responsibility at the other. So let's me on the number 5. Exaggerations. When we are emotional or perspective distorted, this manifests in our speeches, and people who are emotional about something will therefore go over the top. So my god, I have been waiting to give this talk by my whole life. Didn't sleep at all last night, and I am going to give my heart and soul to you. Okay, these are all exaggeration statements. Leaders do this kind of stuff all the time. You might think it's out of order, but in actual fact, exaggeration is just a part and partial of ordinary conversation. So they are just a replication in kind of things that we do naturally. When we do that, let's move on the number 6. Rhyme. There is research showing people are more likely to believe something is true if it's rhyme that if it does not rhyme, which feels absurd, but ends down to what linguists talk about as the processing fluency of language. Now easy is language to swallow. If you speak using long words, long sentences, it's like giving someone a stick and asking them to swallow. Whereas if you give them something pithy like a rhyme, it's like asking them to just sip on something processo. And we learn things through rhyme from the moment that we are toddler. 1 2 3 buckle mushu, and so rhyme are signifies of truth in our society, so they can often be used therefore to conclude violence. I don't know of any of you rhyme. Remember the OJ Simpson case. There is just 44 example of word in which that are true. There's example of word in which it's not true. I once presented this is to a room full of people who worked in the city, and they said, "Oh yeah, we have got one. You have got to speculate to accumulate." Argue maybe the whole financial crisis was predicted on a rhyming fallacy. If only the banker had been going around saying to one another, speculation leads to liquidation, perhaps we wouldn't have been in the mess that we are in. So there we go. Step. are using this sixth step, you can make the most absurd argument sound plausible. Instead of teaching our children to sit down and shut up, we should be teaching them to stand up and speak out. So let's revive rhetoric. Let's really reinvigorate debate around the world, and let really give every child on the planet a chance to become a leader. What should we call the grand initiative? Idea of a what about democracy?